Hi, friends. Welcome back. I'm Dr. Delphina Joyce, Messenger of Joy, and we are very grateful that today we have a very special workshop for you today. Today, we are going to be discussing empathy. This workshop is designed specifically to empower you with effective conflict resolution skills. What does that mean? And foster stronger connections. This is going to be this is going to be a great treat for you because if you ever struggle like I do with people, this one will be very beneficial because you're going to learn some skills and strategies to handle difficult conversations and situations. As people, we have all kinds of behaviors and communication styles. So this is powerful. I also want to have a disclaimer so that we are all fully aware that Dr. Delphina Joyce, Messenger of Joy, and Journey Options You Choose, as well as our featured guest today, Eric McGregor, that we provide information solely. We do not diagnose, we do not prescribe, and if you need any support that requires medical advice, please consult your healthcare professional. So let's get started. Dr. Delphina Joyce, Messenger of Joy, Mind and Body Wellness Practitioner, and our featured guest is Eric McGregor. Eric, would you like to share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, for those who didn't catch the last one, my name is Eric McGregor, and I am a mental fitness coach. I specialize in relationships, resilience, and performance, specifically in that order. And we are here to talk about empathy.
Thank you, Eric. You guys are in for a treat. So today's objectives for this workshop is one, we're going to look at effective communication patterns to de-escalate negative conflicts, as well as the power of empathy. And we are going to be identifying unproductive conflict behaviors. We all do them, including me. We're also going to look at personal emotional triggers. Do you have some? I do. And we're going to dive into the empathy process, some constructive communication techniques, and a practical communication tool. As you move through this, we always want to have the joy mindset. Joy means journey options you choose. It's about your free will and your personal agency. When you walk away from here, we promise that you will have acquired resources and methods to implement your personal holistic wellness first. Healthy living is crucial. Why are we here? Well, have you ever felt overwhelmed, stressed, struggling to find inner peace? Like when your mind is going crazy and you have all these things going through and it's just looping and looping, and you can't figure out exactly what to do or how to handle a situation, and it steals your peace or it robs your joy. Well, we're going to be talking about how do we handle those difficult situations. We're going to equip you with some tools and to grow your inner strength. So, how? How do we do that? Your turn. Eric, talk to us about the hidden costs of unresolved conflict.
Yeah, hidden cost of unresolved conflict. We're talking about inner peace. We're talking about stress, resilience, performance. And many people may be thinking about, what does that have to do with empathy? Because I certainly did when I started on this journey. And every person that I run through the system and the program thinks about that and really wonders, because most of us live our entire lives without really pulling out that superpower called empathy, especially males. For us, it sounds sort of weak and don't really know what it means. But the hidden cost is really unresolved conflict. And that unresolved conflict generally comes in the fact that when we're around people all the time, we build up layers of sediment. We build up these resentments that get put on time after time after time when people don't feel heard by us, when they constantly, you talked about, the quirks that we have, the behaviors that we have, the things that frustrate other people about us, and the things that other people frustrate us with. And when those are not resolved, we tend to just jump to assumptions. We tend to predict what is going to happen. We tend to let things build up. And one of the best ways to resolve the to take care of the unresolved conflict and the hidden cost of those is to have empathy for the other people and to not assume, to take the time before you're solving problems, before you're jumping to conclusions, to really just figure out where that person's coming from. It sounds simple, but most of us skip it. Most of us stay in the data brain. Most of us stay in the analyzing portion and seldom take the time to say, what's happening here? How do I see this from your point of view, even if I don't agree with it? Acknowledge that before we can move on. And when we do that, we start to resolve those unresolved conflicts because the people around us get used to the fact that we are going to try and understand where they're coming from. And then that dissolves all the layers from below. It's a long process, but that's where we start.
Yeah, I like that. I appreciate that. So today we're talking about empathy. We're talking about the cost of unresolved conflict and how these things can actually steal your joy. So what if conflict didn't have to be destructive? What if we didn't have to lose our sleeps? What if challenging conversations could become a bridge to stronger relationships and better outcomes? Is that even a possibility where we wouldn't lose our sleep? I believe it is. So, Eric, what is the biggest personal or professional cost you've paid due to unresolved conflict?
The biggest professional or personal, there's a lot of them. And they had stacked up from the time I was born and until now, and they will continue to. But probably the biggest thing for me really has been understanding that before I got into this framework, before I took stock of my emotions, before I was able to access empathy, before I got steeped in the mental fitness framework, is that I missed out on a lot of my kids' life. And we talked about this before on the previous episode, but it's worth reiterating again for those who didn't see it. There was a point in time when I realized I am a restless person. I do not have empathy for people as much as I should. It's not the first thing that I reach for. I am solving problems. I am hyper rational. And I realized in short order that when my kids were talking and my wife was talking, that I was there and I was present and I was loving, but I wasn't really. I was just waiting for them to get done so that I could speak, so I could solve problems, so I could go and do the next thing, always thinking about the next thing. And so what it cost me was 8 years of my children's life, essentially, 5, 8 years of my children's life. I was there, but I wasn't there. And
Mm.
now I'm there fully. And when they are asking me and talking to me, I am there and nothing else exists because I know that that is going to be waiting for me and that these personal connections that we have with one another are the most important things. So it cost me, attention. And the thing that I value most is time with my family.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful when we think about internal turmoil and we're living in the future or we're living in the past. That's an internal conflict. It's an internal conflict that's happening within our own mind and it's robbing us of the present moment. So I really appreciate you highlighting that. And I'm so grateful that you're present and in this now, that you've found the tools and you have the skills now to maneuver through that internal conflict. You know, the key principle to handling conflict is that you can't do better last time. You can't do better from ayer or yesterday, right? But you can do better next time. You can do better every moment. And this simple truth is so powerful because it removes the prison of regret. How many of you have dealt with regret? It's a prison. It's a prison. It can bind you, it can hold you, and it can keep you stuck there, and it can rob you of your joy. So let's not do that. Let's find out how we can maneuver through these things. Today, we're talking about conflict, we're talking about conflict resolution, and we're highlighting the power of empathy. So, how can reflecting on past interactions empower us to respond more effectively and constructively in future moments of tension? What can we do with this? What does this mean, Eric?
You had talked about the three dimensions of living a moment ago: past, present, future. If we divide those into three parts, oftentimes we live 2/3 of our lives in something that doesn't exist and forget that that 1/3 that does exist is really where we should be anchoring our energy. So when we're living in the past, and we're thinking about the future, we're missing the present. However, that is not to say that there are not useful things that can be done with reviewing the past. And like you said, and this is a saying that I have as well, you can't do better last time, but you can do better next time. And I work with that with clients. I work with that with myself. I work with that with my children. And what that really means is that when we are reviewing the past, to not have those regrets, to not relive that conversation. Oh, I wish I should have said that. If I only would have done this, if this would have been here, it would have been different. Instead, really focus on what would have made that different in the sense that it would have strengthened the relationship. It would have created conflict that was positive. There was a slide earlier that asked, is it possible for conflict to be something positive? And not only is it possible, it's essential. If we want to have a happy life, it's essential. We're going to have conflict. I have conflict with myself when I'm alone. Anytime we have more than one person in the room, we are going to have conflict eventually, especially with those people that we're around the most, the people that we love the most. We're going to have conflict. Now, what I like to do in the past is to imagine a scenario in which I didn't do as good as I could have. And I can go back to that person and say, I can't redo it. I can't go back in time. I can't rewind. But if I could, these are the things that I would change. So when I'm thinking about the past, I'm having intention on how it's going to interact the next time that happens. So if I could change what I did, I would do this. And I can't promise that it'll be perfect next time, but I can promise that it'll be better. And then I will put in my brain, the next time this happens, take note, if X happens, then do Y. And when that happens, we start to let go of that resent and that regret in the past. We start living more in the fully in the future or in the present. And then we create the future that we really want through intention and through reshaping the past. So eventually, the past that catches up to us because of the things that we're doing better now becomes one that we have less regret in and one that we have to stay anchored less in for all the right reasons.
Yeah, thank you. That's really important when we think about living in the past and being present in this now, right? So it is important to reflect. Those are all powerful activities or experiences that we could do with ourselves to improve our daily living. And when we look at empathy, we're going to dive into what empathy really means. It is a cornerstone to positive conflict resolution. Why? Because you learn to understand where the other person is coming from. The ability to truly hear and understand another person's experience, even when we disagree with their perspective, is empathy. So let's see. What is empathy? Can you tell us a little bit about empathy, Eric?
Empathy means different things to different people. If you ask 10 people what empathy was, I think everyone has kind of a different take on it. And I'm sure that yours and I's would be nearly the same, but we may have some disagreements about what empathy is, period. And one thing that I have found extremely helpful with people is just setting a baseline expectation of what empathy is at its core element. And so for me, what empathy means is just simply listening, hearing all the way through, trying to fully understand, and then reflecting back to that person what it is that I heard to give them any opportunity to let me know if I got it wrong. And it doesn't mean that I agree with them. It doesn't mean that I condone their decisions. It doesn't mean that I would wish for them to do anything different. It just means that if I was them with all of their life experiences, that I would probably feel the same way too. And once that's done, they understand that you're going to take the time to listen and to feel and to understand. So for me, empathy is just about understanding and letting go of any preconceived notions, as well as making sure that they know that I don't have to agree with them. I don't have to condone it. So it doesn't have anything to do with agreement or condonement. I think that's the biggest hang up for people is once that's let go, empathy becomes a whole lot easier to move forward with.
Yeah, I agree. Empathy is not an agreement, but it is, in some sense, for me, empathy is standing in that person's shoes and doing my best to understand their point of view and their perspective, where they're coming from. Because if I can understand where they're coming from, then I could be more loving and caring. I've watched so many movies where they do that and this person is doing their own thing and then they realize like, oh wow, all this other stuff was happening and that's why this person behaved this way, right? Now that we have additional information, we might understand differently. And I think about like a person who is in chronic pain. And I'm not saying being in chronic pain would give a person the right to be uh, abrasive, rude, mean, or anything like that. But if we can understand what that person is experiencing, maybe we can show up a little bit more kindly, or understanding, truly understanding where they're coming from. So, effective communication patterns. What does this have to do with empathy, and how does it relate to us? So, there's some key characteristics for empathy. One is what we just talked about, the perspective taking, where it is our ability to be able to imagine and understand another person's viewpoint, their thoughts, their intentions, even if we don't agree with what they are doing, saying, being, or anything. But we can actually do our best to understand their viewpoint. And it also has to do with emotional resonance. And what that means is it's the capacity to feel emotions that are congruent with another's, meaning that I or you would understand and can relate to their emotional state. You have anything to say on this one, Eric?
I think those are also such important points. It's just understanding their emotional state and knowing that, especially, this one of the slides earlier that you said is, uh, understanding where they're coming from, especially when you disagree with them, because oftentimes we put up that barriers and say, I would never do that. I just can't understand how someone could do that. I can't understand. No, you can't, because you're not them. But if you were, you do the exact same thing. And that's a very difficult thing for people to wrap their head around. But if you were born and ate all the same food as them and had all the same experiences as them and was raised and had all the experience of them, you would be them. So sometimes it takes a lot of practice. Empathy takes practice. These are practices.
Totally agree. Two other key characteristics of empathy are non-judgmental stance. And we've talked about that in that you approach another person's situation with an open mind. Eric has identified that again and again. He's highlighted that. You're free from personal biases or premature evaluation. It requires listening to understand, not to respond. You're just listening to understand. And that's a non-judgmental stance. Crucial for empathetic, for being empathetic, for having empathy, as well as communicating understanding. It's the ability to convey that you grasp their experience, that often through verbal affirmation, body language, and appropriate responses. So it would be something that you're acknowledging, like, I understand you're nervous right now. I can see by the tightening and the lifting of your shoulders that you may be anxious. It's doing your best to understand where they're coming from. Anything you want to share on this, Eric?
Really the embodiment of it, in that you can't fake it. This is something that you cannot fake, and eventually you do get to the point to where, if you practice enough, it becomes true. And I'll probably share a story later about just kids disagreeing, and when my older had relayed to my younger, they were fighting, and we kind of just said, what are you actually fighting about? And then what are you feeling? What's he feeling? And I said, if you were him, would you feel this way? And she said, she thought about it and said, you know what, I would. And then I asked her, I said, is it true? Yeah, it was true. So in one truth, there was a position that they were arguing against, and she was right in that position, and he was right in that position. They were fighting. But when they stepped back to the aspirational level and they got down to it, and she really took that time to have the empathy and said, when he explains it to me this way, I can understand that if I was him, I'd feel that way. And I said, is it true? Yeah, what I said is true. Okay, well then we get to decide how to proceed forward now, because both of those things are true. So empathy is the power of understanding and living in someone's situation.
Yeah. I'm thinking about like an experience where I could be super angry. Like, say I purchased something and they promised to deliver key components and they didn't, right? And so I'm thinking about what would be my empathetic response to understanding that, especially if internally I feel like they have failed. And to be able to move myself out of my own positioning, right? Because I have my own thoughts, my own things. But if my if my goal is to be empathetic, then I've got to get out of my desire, my stands, and my needs to be able to position myself in such a way that I could have some of those four components that we just talked about to be able to show up empathetically, to understand. So the power of empathy falls into various things. So one, it helps to de-escalate tension. So when individuals feel understood and they feel heard, their emotional defenses lower. And that's really important when you're having disagreement. Empathy helps to diffuse heated situations. Have you ever been in a conversation and it's not a conversation, it's a freaking argument? It is a hot argument and there's emotions flying back and forth, and really nothing is getting resolved. One person's voice is loud, then the other person's louder, then the other person's louder. And next thing you know, there's really no listening happening and there's absolutely no empathy happening. So, when you want to move from that positioning and move to an empathetic response, then your whole body language, all your demeanor, all of your responses change because you're not trying to defend your behaviors. What you're doing is listening to understand. And so empathy also fosters understanding and perspective. It helps a person to get a deeper understanding of the discussion and what is happening within that interaction. Anything to share, Eric?
You said conflict. You said escalation. That made me think of a probably the most pressing situation in which empathy is used: hostage negotiation,
Mhm.
FBI interrogators. They do not do what they do effectively without empathy. If you have a situation that is just boiled over and you are telling the person they are wrong and you are arguing for your position, that person's not going to listen, especially under the weight of the circumstances. So when things get stressful, when things get tense, when things start building, that's even more of an opportunity and more of a reason to reach for empathy. Now, on the other hand, if that negotiator, if that situation is to be disinvolved, you would have a situation where the person is saying, and remember, they don't agree with them, they don't condone them, but they would say things like, you know what, if all this happened in my life or led up to this, I'd be upset too. In fact, I'd be really mad. I'd be pissed, and maybe I'd do the same thing as you do. I can understand why you're so upset. And it's not until that person, even under those dire of circumstances, feels heard that they're willing to open up. And we can use that same tactics in our lives, our relationships, our marriages, with our children, business, all sorts of events. So if you think it's not powerful, there's a reason why it's used in this most stressful situations that you could possibly imagine.
Mhm. Yeah, you identified a very key component, and that's building trust and rapport. So, at a high tense level, when you're talking about hostage negotiations and using that example, right? Like the whole idea is to build that trust and build that rapport rapidly. And so when we are in a situation that is a conflict or disagreement, if we can take the stand of empathy, understanding that we want to understand what that person is saying, and by the true intention of wanting to understand, it changes the entire energetics of that conversation. Because at that point, it's not about me against you. It's about me understanding your lived experience. It's about me understanding the point of view and the perspective that you're coming from so that I can grow a bridge and a connection. It's different from, I think about like electronically, right? I think about these electronics like pull, 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 right? So you, me, no, me, you, no, me, you, bro, me, right? And they think about, wait a minute, I want to know like you, what's happening with you? And you're building that bridge of understanding and that connection. It promotes a collaborative situation and it automatically changes from you against me or me against you. It becomes us. Ultimately, empathy moves conflict from a destructive force into an opportunity for growth, learning stronger human connections. And jump in anytime, Eric, that you would like to share anything in here. So, when we think about empathy and how it empowers us to bridge divides, heal wounds, and forge pathways to shared progress, what does that mean? Thoughts?
It's empathy works. And a lot of what people get from things like this and from reading books and watching movies and YouTube and podcasts is the inspiration. They get the insight. Uh, but what it really starts working for people is when they use it and they see this works. I don't have to be right all the time. I don't have to solve problems all the time. I don't have to constantly jump in with my perspective. There's a lot of things that just don't need solved. And when I think the proof is in the pudding, and when people start seeing, they go to this tool, they use empathy, and they really get curious about what's going on with you? How are you feeling?
Mhm.
What you start seeing it work. And that's when the magic happens. So, if anyone takes anything out of this, I would say suspend your disbelief and just give it a try. See what happens.
Yeah, and so if I want to learn the skill of empathy, then this is what it looks like. So empathy means feeling with someone. You're really attempting to feel what they are feeling. It's about understanding their feelings, connecting with their emotional state, and if the goal is to experience what they're experiencing at your own internal level, it's a deeper connection that allows more meaningful support and effective communication. If I can understand why this person is so angry or filled with rage, and I can really step into that and understand the background that's come from it. Why are we here? What is happening? Then I can create a connection of understanding and I can show up differently. Empathy is about saying, I understand how you feel. And you truly mean it, because that's what you talked about, Eric. You're like, you can't fake empathy. You can't fake it. You can be like, oh, yeah, I get it. Yeah, I understand you. Wrong. If it's not the truth, then your energetics will demonstrate that the true essence of empathy is a connection and understanding. And even if we can't see those energetics, they are happening. It's a connection between one person and the other. How does truly showing empathy in a conflict change the way both sides are heard and the outcome? This is a question. Friends, put some more questions in the Q&A and help us to support you and to support each other so that we can grow in the skill set of empathy. So please put your questions in Q&A and we will bring them up to the presentation so that we can address them. So Eric, let's answer this question from the house. How does truly showing empathy in a conflict change the way both sides are heard and the outcome?
Every time it works, almost every time, unless there's massive weight underneath it. But I would give a caveat here is that sometimes both sides don't need to be heard. Sometimes, I mean, this is a classic example, but a husband and a wife dynamic where the wife just wants to talk and the husband wants to solve, and sometimes it's just listening and reflecting back and having that empathy and going, oh man, I feel that way too. I've been guilty so many times of just having to weigh in, having to have an opinion, having to solve things.
Mhm.
But both sides, especially if there's a disagreement that's on the positional level, if we can step back to the aspirational level, like I was talking about with the kids earlier, then both sides do feel heard. And the situation was, I might as well flesh it out now. My son was sick, and he missed his soccer game. He's sleeping, and in the time that he was sleeping, we got out Halloween decorations, and my daughter and my wife decorated for Halloween in the house.
Mhm.
And Liam, my son, came out and he saw that everything was decorated, and he said to to my daughter on the way out the door, hey, I'm upset. I wish you guys would have waited for me to decorate. And my daughter had replied back to him, well, mom got this out and you were sleeping anyway, and we didn't know that you wanted to. And so we're getting in the car on the way to go to school. And I said, hey, just stop real quick. Can you imagine a situation where You're not feeling well, and you go to sleep, and you wake up, and we've decorated for Christmas, and you weren't a part of it. How would you feel?
Hmm.
And she thought about it, and I said, let's go back. We get to do this again. This is just like a bad park job. Put it in reverse, put it back in between the lines.
Hmm.
And she said to him, she said, you know what, buddy? You were sick, and we decorated without you, and we probably shouldn't have done that, and I'd be upset too. And I said, and that's when I said, is that true? Yeah, it's true. And my son looked at her and said, that's okay. We can just do something else. And it was resolved just like that, because he just wanted someone just to say, hey man, like, you know what, we screwed up a little bit. We weren't thinking about it, and we did it, and I'd be upset too. And that's a small thing, but from the time that you're 10 years old, you start stacking those wins. What does it look like for friendships, for professional relationships, for when you get married, when you have kids, all throughout your life, you start stacking those ability to de-escalate that conflict, to not put those roadblocks in, to not start that resentment cycle. And that was just an easy, simple illustration of how empathy can quickly de-escalate. And that was like 3 days ago that happened.
Yeah. And the beautiful thing is that you're training your children to be empathetic. You're actually modeling what that looks like and you're showing them. So they naturally will become, well, not naturally because there's training and skill involved.
It's not
But
natural for
it's
some
not
reason.
natural because we're selfish, right? Like as human beings, we're selfish. We want our way. Our way is the right way. And so being empathetic creates a whole different pathway of learning. So thank you for that. Thank you for making our world a better place by training your kids and learning yourself. I mean, I know I work on this all the time and empathy is not agreeing with the person's position. I may not agree with you, but I'm going to do my best to understand you. I may not accept the behavior that you are demonstrating. I don't agree with yelling and screaming or you know and I certainly am not condoning harmful actions or behaviors and I'm not giving up on my own needs or becoming a doormat. That's so important. When we're talking about empathy, we're not saying you let people walk all over you. What we're saying is we're looking at getting a perspective view. Anything you want to share in this, because this is important when we think about what empathy is and what empathy is not. And some people might say, well, I'm just becoming a doormat by being empathetic and I just let them get whatever they want now because I want to agree with them. And if that's not it, empathy is not agreeing with the person. What's the strongest difference, Eric? What can give us something powerful to walk away with?
It, it's not any of those things. It's not weakness. It's the most important thing. I think last time we talked about, what empathy is it's gently knocking on the door with Girl Scout cookies in your hands,
Mhm.
extending a bridge, and that allows that conversation to continue. What it is not is accepting. It's not condoning. It's not agreeing. It's not allowing anyone to walk over you. And in fact, it's quite the opposite. It's putting a foot down and saying, this impacts me this way, because you also have to be empathetic towards yourself. Empathy is it's a three-way swipe. Empathy for ourselves first and foremost. We
Mhm.
should treat ourselves like we would want to treat our children, or we want our children to be treated, or we want others, our friends. How would we treat our friends? Well, treat yourself that way. And
Mhm.
then how do you treat other people and understand where they're coming from, and not letting circumstances injure you as well, being empathetic to the fact that things don't go as planned. The weather's not going to be the way that it wants to be. Seldom do things work out the way that they're supposed to, but that doesn't mean that you allow people to walk on you. And it is quite the opposite.
Yeah. I think one thing that I've learned with life and with time is that when I am upset, angry, frustrated, whatever that emotion is, there is truth in when I feel heard, when I feel like you really understand what I'm saying, my emotion transmutes and it can change. But when I feel like you're not listening to me, you don't hear what I'm saying. Can you just listen? Right? Like it's interesting how the emotions have such a big play in communication. And what are ways to know that a person has felt seen or validated? I think about myself when I'm talking about like when I feel like I'm not being heard and I may be emotionally charged, I know that my voice can elevate, my tone will change, my hand movement might get stronger. Like, so that's when I feel not heard. What might happen when a person feels seen or validated? Can you quantify that?
It quantifies a good term because the scientific name for this is mirror neurons. When we are feeling something, other people feel it. We do have a measurable energy about us. And I think everyone knows the feeling when someone walks into the room with a dark cloud and you can just feel it dragging things down.
Mhm.
And we know when someone walks into the room and they're all full of energy, you're like, oh man, all right. Like, look at, I can feel it. Like, your energy is contagious. And it is. It's contagious both ways. Mirror neurons are something that's just baked into our evolution so that we know the person that we're interacting with is dangerous, is happy, is useful, is going to reflect back on them what they're giving you. So when a person feels heard, and validated, it literally looks like they are mirroring your energy. You can see a lightness in the eyes. You talked about the shoulders earlier. They're not tense and they're not balled up. They're not squinting. They're not waiting. Their breath isn't shallow. You can see people when they start to get upset that their breath shallows. The things elevate. They start to become more punctual. They ball their fist up. They get nervous energy about them. All of those things go away, and then we have a calm about us, and it's more fun, and you can feel the looseness. There's less static in the air. So what does it feel like? What does it look like? It looks like just having a conversation and not an escalation. The forms of escalation are: we have ideas, we talk. When talking doesn't go well, we yell. When yelling doesn't go well, we fight. When fighting doesn't go well, catastrophic things happen. So
Mhm.
hopefully we just stay in the talking.
Yeah, yeah. So some of the visuals would be that the voice could be at like this level as opposed to like a raised level that you're no listener. And see, like even the physical changes, right? So we can see that energetically there are physical manifestations of what it looks like to feel seen and validated as opposed to if it what it looks like to not feel seen and not feel validated. So there are physical manifestations that that shows in. Now, empathy can transform conflict, and we've talked about that. We've talked about what are the things that it can do. It can break down barriers, it can reveal hidden needs, it can reduce emotional intensity and you talked about the mirror neurons on that. Anything you want to share on this for our friends that are watching?
It does all of those things. The first thing that it does is opens the door, and it does break down those barriers. It reveals hidden needs, and we'll get more into this in future episodes, especially with the explore portion of it. But no one is going to. It never gets to that point. It never reduces the emotional intensity. It never breaks down barriers or reveals hidden needs until it's used. We don't naturally go there. We naturally live in the left side of our brain, which is our logic and our data brain, and we try and solve problems. We try and pit our position against their position against our position, and we argue, and our computers war with each other. When we get into the right side of the brain, all of a sudden we become what we are as humans. Humans are great at data and logic, but data and logic is not what we are as a species. We're emotional, and until we deal with the emotion, the data and the logic is never going to work in moments of conflict.
Yeah. And you can see in these images, thank you for that, Eric. You can see in these images, there's smiling, there's handshakes, there's gestures of openness and acceptance. And it's really highlighting to find your joy within, nourish your own potential, and unlock your potential. What that means is investing in yourself, growing as an individual, learning the skills and strategies to show up as an empathetic person. So we've learned what empathy means, and empathy basically means to understand, do your best to understand the point of view, the emotions, the thoughts, the experiences that an individual is coming from and how they're showing up. And common empathy mistakes are this, and you've talked about this. When I'm operating in my left brain, like I'm solution oriented. I want to fix the problem. I'm hearing what you're saying, and I'm not really tapping into what you really need. I just want to solve your problem because you said, let me tell you about today. And you're telling me about what happened today and how you were frustrated and had a difficult situation. And all I can walk away with and say is like, well, all you had to do was this. And I'm like, what? Did you even hear what I said? I just told you about how I'm frustrated and angry and all the situations happening, and all you can do is tell me I should have called the person. No, you're not listening, Eric.
Because I'm not.
You're not. You're not. You're just let me solve the problem. This person's problem is this, and this is how we fix it. But that's not what's being communicated when we're doing empathy. When we're doing empathy, we're not trying to solve a person's problem. We're connecting and listening to understand. So here's some common empathy mistakes. We have the quick fix. We just want to jump in and give them a solution before we actually understand the problem fully. And it's the me too response, shifting. And I do this sometimes. Like I got to get really better at this. Like when I'm listening for someone, it's not about me, but I'm like, oh yeah, I had the same experience. They're like, I don't care about your experience. I just want you to hear me right now, you know? Or the advice trap. How many of us have fallen in there where we just want to, well, here's the blah, 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 or logic override. Trying to reason a person's emotions away instead of actually acknowledge them like, I don't know why you're so angry about that. It's not a big deal.
That's going to go well.
No. So these are some of the common empathy mistakes. Anything you like to share about this, Eric?
We all fall into them. And the higher you are on the logic train, on the hyper rational train, on the hyperachiever train, on the controller train, the more that you're going to go into that. And I was laughing because the Me Too response. We've been doing that since we were kids. When you're on the playground and one of your friends falls down and gets hurt because you guys were playing football or playing tag or whatever you're doing, and you're involved in it, all of a sudden you have an injury too. It's like oh, I'm hurt too. It's you're really not. But I think that's empathy in its own way. But it's a misguided empathy, and the logic override. I mean, I think for me anyway, that's first and foremost is that I just skip. I used to just skip right to logic, and then that logic turns into a fix, which turns into advice, which turns into me too. So these are, I think, everyone on all of these probably resonates.
Yeah. You know, one of the things, I'm just going to be totally vulnerable, is when someone says to me, oh, welcome to my world. Like, I don't want to be in your world. I don't want to be in this situation here. But like, that's their way of making a connection. But it's also undermining a person's emotion, their experience, and it's definitely not a demonstration of empathy, that's for sure. So let's look right here. And we have a question in the house, and the question is, reflecting on past conflicts, when have you inadvertently fallen into a common empathy trap, like jumping to a quick fix, offering unsolicited advice, making it about yourself, or trying to logic away emotions? And what did you learn about truly listening? We kind of went into that, but what did you learn?
I'm going to use a personal story here. This is one of my favorite ones because you have certain times in your life where you feel like you've been struck by lightning, and we all have to recognize that we're all on a different evolutionary chain. Some of us are more evolved than others when it comes to understanding and knowing emotions and behaviors. That's why we do what we do. Is that you and I feel the calling, the purpose to teach this stuff. Like, oh my God, look at what I have found. I have found this martial art for the mind that I've become a master. I can have a practice of self-mastery, and I can exercise this in the most important portions of my life. And now I can have better relationships, better resilience, and more performance. So I was walking, my wife and I, we like to walk at night with the dogs. We've lived in this same spot for more than 10 years. And they just recently started developing some of the land behind us. And so we're walking on the road. It's at night. And mind you, we've been doing this for like 10 years.
Mhm.
My wife likes to wear flip-flops when we walk. I'm always like a more of a boots person in case I gotta fight a bear or something. I don't know. I'm always the guy who's like back to the wall, watching the doors. I'm prepared for things. I'm not hyper
Uh-huh.
vigilant, but I'm prepared for things.
Uh-huh.
And the construction crew had kicked a big rock into the middle of the road, and she kicked the rock, and it's really dark. There's not lights around us. She kicked a rock with her toe, and at the time I was working on my hyper rational saboteur, and she kicked the rock, and I looked at her and I said, "You know, if you wouldn't have been wearing flip flops, that wouldn't have happened." And I stopped right then, and I went, "Oh my god." Pardon my French. I am such an asshole. I'm sorry. That must have really hurt. How you feeling? Like, do you need help? And it was at that moment that I realized that's just what I do all the time. That was a glaring example. We've been here for 10 years. She's never stubbed her toe on a rock before. Now, if that would have been the fifth, sixth, seventh time she stubbed her toe on a rock, then
Mhm.
maybe I could have had the conversation. She didn't need anything fixed. She didn't need to be told that she'd done something wrong. She just needed to be like, oh my God, is your toe okay? It was at that
Mhm.
moment I realized, like, this is just an example of what I do all the time with everyone. And that was like the lightning bolt that said, wake up, look what you're doing here. This is not helpful.
Mhm. Oh, thank you for that story. And thank you for waking up and addressing it in a different way because really in that moment she was heard and instead of just correcting her, it
And it
was
only
like,
took it
oops.
only took 40 plus years.
Yeah, yeah. Good job. Good job. And we've all been in those. So thank you. Here's another example. I mean, and now we're gonna go, not that we're gonna go into gender biases or anything like that, but when you talked about like being hyper vigilant and operating in the left side of the brain, like we're solution oriented. It's about a solution, but using the skills of empathy is not necessarily that. And so it is an adjustment. It is actually standing back from maybe your natural state. If your natural state is solution oriented, then you're going to have to actually do some different responses and some rewiring and things. So empathy in action, a real example. Before reactive response, you're always late. This is so disrespectful. I don't understand why you can't just manage your time better. Well, what's going to happen to the person who arrives late and this is what they get told? Now, Eric talked to us about his wife and her having flip-flops and hitting a rock, and his natural response was like, hello, wear tennis shoes. This is why we wear tennis shoes when we're walking. It's dark. But really, the result is going to get a certain impact based on what we say. So in this example, a person is arriving late to a meeting and the other person becomes defensive, like the conflict escalates and no real understanding reached. Like, well, hello, I got the train and there were red lights and I dropped cereal on the floor with my kid and I had to take them to school and I didn't really sleep well last night. Like that's automatic defense because they're feeling attacked. However, if an empathetic response would be something like this: I notice you've been arriving later than planned. Help me to understand what's been going on for you lately, right? Like the real point is to understand. Help me to understand. And it's authentic, it's genuine and there's a clear distinction because I've seen people who have an agenda and they say, I want to understand, but they really have an agenda. That's not empathy. That's different. That's very different. But the result in this situation is there's an open space for honest conversation about underlying challenges and collaborative problem solving. And empathy is not operating with an agenda. It's not. We talked about some of the things that empathy is and what empathy is not. And empathy is not operating with an agenda that is a selfish agenda. It's about truly understanding where that person's coming from, not about understanding to manipulate the situation. That's different. And we're going to dive in more. So let's look at some unproductive behaviors to recognize because we're all human and we have different types of behaviors, right? So navigating conflict is unavoidable. Why? Because we're human and we are interacting with people all the time. We have different points of view, we have different beliefs, thoughts, experiences. We're all unique and special. And because of that, there are specific behaviors that we can exhibit that will actually make conflict worse. It won't really help. So let's identify what some of those conflict behaviors are. And here they are. Unproductive conflict behaviors, defensiveness, blame, interrupting, stonewalling, personal attacks. Think for a moment. Have you done any of those? I know I have. I've done all of these. I've done every single one of these. Let's see what they actually are. So, an unproductive behavior of defensiveness. Oh, look at that picture right there. It's when you say to someone, you know, hey, just want to remind you, like, make sure you turn the stove off. And instead of actually hearing, like, oh, turn the stove off, it's like, well, if you would have been helping me, then I wouldn't have forgotten to turn the freaking stove off. I needed your help. Where were you? That's defensiveness. And you also see this body language, right? Like it's like this is like closing up. It's protecting you. You're protecting yourself. So an example of an unproductive conflict behavior is defensiveness. You automatically go in to defend yourself because you're feeling personally attacked. And so you deliver criticism with excuses, you have counterattack, you portray yourself as a victim. It actually shuts down constructive dialogue and prevents resolution. Another one is blaming, where you blame the other person and you attempt to shift responsibility from problems onto that individual instead of actually taking accountability for the situation. Like, oh, yeah, boom. I should have turned off the stove. I was the one cooking. But instead, it creates resentment. It avoids addressing the root cause. This one, this next one, interrupting. Ooh, that one's really powerful and it's hard to handle for me. I know that there are situations where I've been in an experience and we're having a conversation and the person just really will not be quiet. They just keep interrupting because it's all about getting their word done. And then the last one is stonewalling. Stonewalling is withdrawing from interactions, refusing to communicate, or shutting down emotionally during a conflict. This creates emotional distance and makes problem solving impossible. Eric, your ideas, your thoughts, your conversation.
All of them. We feel these, and it's our go-to. We feel charged up. Um, for me and our family, we like to joke about it. Like, oh, when one of the kids gets upset or I get upset, I go, what are we really trying to do here? Yes, of course, mom knew that that piece of paper was super important to you. She picked it up and said, I know this is so important to you that I'm going to crumble it up and throw it away. And then people see, like, oh my God, these inner thoughts that I have, they are ridiculous. Of course, they wouldn't have been doing that. And that's kind of a fun way to address those and go, what are you really feeling? And is there any truth to it?
Yeah. It's, stonewalling is an interesting one. Now I know how to name it. So I think when you see a behavior and you learn how to name it, and you learn the knowledge behind what it is, how it looks, what it feels like, and all that, then it gives you a certain level of power. Like now I understand that I don't like conflict. I really don't. I do not like conflict. But I've learned to have constructive conflict and dialogue, and I've learned to understand things. There are times when I don't want to interact with the situation. I'm like, you're already decided. You've already made your decision. I understand where you're coming from, and there's no power in this. It's about peace. It's about your peace and my peace. I understand where you're coming from, and that's very different from stonewalling because stonewalling is actually refusing to communicate. It's shutting down and ignoring that person. That's a little different than, saying, I get it. I understand where you're coming from. That makes That makes sense, Reflecting on unproductive conflict behaviors, we've identified defensiveness, blaming, interrupting, stonewalling. Which one do you find yourself most challenged by, either personally or when interacting with others?
For me personally, it's the blaming because there's a lack of accountability there. And we talked about this last time. Is that in my house we have 5 rules of House McGregor. There's lots of other stuff that goes on. But 5 very easy tenets. 1 is you do the right thing, especially when it's hard. 2 is you tell the truth, even when you're going to get big trouble. 3 is you are kind when others are not. 4 is you lead with your heart, and if you need to, you finish with your fist. And the 5th is you don't have to be the best, but you have to do your best. If the answer to all 5 of those things is yes, we got nothing to work on here. If the answer to any of those is no, any of those simple things, we have something to learn, and we can hold ourselves accountable, and we can do better next time. Not last time, next time. The blaming thing really gets to me. The defensiveness is understandable because it puts up a wall, puts up a barrier. We want to do that. We want to deflect. The blaming portion means that I have nothing to learn here. The interrupting is, again, kind of the same way. Stonewalling in the term of mental fitness, that is your avoider saboteur. We can deal with that too. The blaming is, for me, the one that
Triggers you.
triggers me the most.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Thank
there it is. Triggers. Right, look at that.
Yeah. So we're going to dive in now. This is supposed to be an hour, but we seem to have so much content to go through. So we're
I'm
talking
known for
about
that, by the way.
yeah, yeah. So we're moving into pinpointing personal emotional triggers. This is important because when we can understand where we're coming from and what our personal triggers are, then we can address them differently. Knowledge is power. Understanding and managing our emotional triggers is a cornerstone of navigating conflict with clarity and empathy. We talked about empathy, what it is, how to show up. We talked about different types of behaviors that can show up. Blaming, defensiveness, stonewalling, those are behaviors that we can exhibit. And when we exhibit those, they shut down and they can escalate actual conflict. So now we're going to talk about our own personal triggers. Where are we at? Where are we coming from? Because our personal triggers are really important. If we can understand where we're coming from and we can do differently, like Eric has addressed, then that can make things even better. So what we're going to talk about is what is a personal trigger? What is a personal trigger? And how do we handle and address personal triggers? I'm over here working on this right here. And let's see what that means. So, what is a trigger? What is a trigger? I like how it says, find your center with joy. Triggers are those specific situations, words, behaviors that can instantly shift us from a calm, rational state to a highly reactive one. By identifying our personal triggers, our hot spots, AKA, we can immense power to choose our responses rather than being dictated by them. This is really important to understand where your triggers are. So I definitely have triggers. They started from when I was a little kid. I I don't like to feel like I'm not being heard or that I'm being silenced. When I feel like I'm being silenced, that really can create some interesting behaviors within me and thoughts. And so I show up differently when I feel like someone is attempting to silence me. What about you, Eric? Where are you at on that? Do you know any of them? Here's some specific triggers, my friends, if you're, watching and checking this out. But what does it have to do with you, Eric? Do you have any specific triggers that you're aware of?
I used to have tons. I used to be a pretty semi-angry person. Triggers are interesting because they indicate something is going to go off. Pull the trigger, there's going to be an action that happens. I would reframe it for some of the people listening that you may want to think about also like a switch, a light switch. We're working on uninstalling the light switch and putting on a dimmer switch, because when your emotions are out of control, they are leading you and you are not leading them. For me, the biggest one that I still struggle with is being misunderstood. I have worked very hard to be an authentic person. I am who I am, but like pretty through and through. I'm a very transparent person. I tell you how it is. I don't sugarcoat a lot of things, and I am intentional in my language and I am intentional in my actions. And when I feel like those are being taken out of context or they're not being understood, when I've gone through painstaking effort to make sure that it's well articulated and that it cannot possibly be misunderstood. It's one of the reasons why we're going over. I am overly articulate when it comes to wanting to make sure that there's no room for error. So when those things happen, I then can get defensive and feel like you're intentionally misunderstanding me, which generally isn't the case. But that is a trigger for me.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, for giving that that transparency, really, that being transparent with our audience, because we are human, we have different experiences. And so for me, when we reflect on our past reactions, we can understand some of our triggers based on how we actually showed up in the past. And we can see like, ooh, that
Yeah.
triggered me. That's for sure. I responded like, wow, or identifying situational cues. What does that mean? It's paying attention to your environment, such as public criticism, tight deadlines, specific family dynamics. Those things can put us in a crunch, and we can respond differently based on those. Recognizing verbal cues, certain words or phrases, often from past experiences, can make us feel defensive, attacked, dismissed. Pinpoint this charged language. I remember when I worked for this organization, and there was a gentleman there who was a doctorate, and I'm a doctorate. And this gentleman outright refused to call me doctor. And I always called that person doctor as a form of respect. It's one of my core values. I respect a person. When I meet a person, you can lose respect, but I'm gonna respect you the moment I meet you, right? And that gave me a little bit of time to like sit with and digest, because I never understood, why did that person really refuse to acknowledge my title? And I learned something really cool, Eric, when I started calling that person by their name instead of by their title, Dr. So and so, and I started calling them by their name. It changed the entire dynamics, because what I realized was that person never saw me as a doctor, and there was a hierarchy. And until I brought that person to the same level with me, that person was really never going to see me at his level. That was just an understanding that I needed to learn. And I needed to learn that if I called him by his name, then I was meeting him at his level. And the dynamics of the relationship completely changed, because I never called him doctor after that. I just called him by his name, and we moved forward because there was a different way of perspective. That triggered me until I realized where that person was coming from, and I adapted the way I showed up. It made a whole difference in the relationship. And noticing physical sensations. Our body gives us warnings. It actually communicates with us very clearly if we pay attention to it. That stiffness and that raising of the shoulders, the headache, the clenching of the fist, those are all physical communications. And if we pay attention to our physical communications, it will help us to recognize our triggers. Anything else you'd like to share on this, Eric?
It's a two-way street. The body affects the mind, and the mind affects the body. I don't start any of my sessions until we go from left brain to right brain, because we're holding on to the past, holding on to tension, we're thinking about the future. And it's I do some fun exercises that if that people can do. If you think about lemon juice or vinegar or pickles, your mouth probably waters. What's happening there? You're having a physical reaction to something in your mental. Now
Yeah.
smile and try and say out loud really nasty things. Now scrunch your face and do your shoulders and notice your energy. So yeah, that energy, that physical, it's a two-way street, and your mind affects the body affects the mind. If we're cognizant of that and we're intentional about it, we can change a whole lot. Back to those mirror
Yeah.
neurons and how we approach situations.
Yeah. Thank you, Eric. So we are definitely on our hour. So my question to you is, do you want to continue moving forward, or would you like to move down to the free gift? What are your thoughts?
I'm always up for. I'm a long conversationalist, so if you have the time, I have the time.
All right, awesome. Let's continue on then. So what's important now is we've defined empathy, we've actually given some characteristics to empathy. We've talked about defensive behaviors, blaming, stonewalling, different things like that. And we've looked at your personal triggers, things that can trigger you and how to learn from them so that you can alter how you show up. Because what we're diving into today is constructive conversation, handling disagreements, handling hardships, arguments, things like that. Once you've identified your triggers, the next step is to develop some conscious strategies. Here are some strategies for managing conflict. This is really powerful. Pause and breathe. Identifying the underlying need. So when Eric was talking about his wife and how she wore flip-flops and she hurt her foot, he talked about his first response was like, "Hello, this is why we wear tennis shoes or closed-toe shoes." But really, her underlying need was not to be told what kind of shoes to wear. It was more to acknowledge her pain and her discomfort of what happened. And so when we are in conflict, if we can actually have some strategies for managing using I statements. I really just need you to listen for a moment here. I don't need you to solve my situation. I don't need you to give me your thoughts or your opinions. I just need you to listen. Listen for what I'm feeling. Listen for my emotion. Listen to the experience that I had. This is what I need from you. I just need you to understand. I need you to acknowledge my hurt, my pain. I need this from you. And when we can learn to communicate those I statements, ooh, people hear you better as opposed to you never listen. Using I statements is a strategy for managing triggers and conflict and requesting a break. Sometimes things can get emotionally heated and requesting a break. Hey, you know what? I need to get some water. I need to take a walk. I'm just really emotionally charged right now and I need to like get away for a minute. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with really listening to your body and what you need. Eric, thoughts?
These are crucial. The pause, um, that breath, recognizing when your breath is shallow, identifying underlying needs. I always try and ask like, hey, what do you need here now? Like, do you want me to just listen, or are we solving things? Like, I literally ask that now. And the I statements, it does diffuse because as soon as you have the you start blaming, you start deflecting, you start defending, and the request a break. Oh my God, I wish I would have learned this earlier. Sometimes my wife just needs to be left alone. Sometimes my kids just need to be left alone. Quickly say what you have to say. Hopefully, it's not misinterpreted. Just let all that boil down. Hey, you know what? It's not what I intended. This is what I meant. Now go sit with that for a little while. And then when we come back, we can be in a calmer state and we can figure out what you need.
Yeah, yeah. Agreed, agreed. Understanding these things about it's all about getting to know yourself better, really, and giving yourself the skills and the strategies to be a more effective communicator. You could also work on shifting your perspective, and one of my favorite, practicing self-compassion. So, shifting perspective means that you try and consider the other person's intention, which is often not malicious, or their own potential triggers. This empathy can diffuse your own reactivity. Now, we're not saying that people don't behave manipulatively or anything like that, but we are talking about that this could be a strategy to help deflect uh, conflict, really, is trying and we talked about empathy when you can understand them and practicing self-compassion. This is very powerful when we think about like it's okay to ask for a break, it's okay to step away, it's okay to spend some moments encouraging yourself and speaking lovingly to yourself, because we can also be our worst critic in our own conversation within our mind. And so practicing self-compassion means that you are actually loving yourself and speaking kindly to yourself. Anything else, Eric?
All set. The dog's going crazy.
Yeah, yeah. He's saying, I agree, I agree. Ruff, ruff, I agree. Ruff, ruff, I agree. Can you remember a disagreement where simply reflecting back what the other person felt completely shifted the conversation?
It's, I mean, that's constant. Sorry, I think the kids are coming home from school right now, so the dog's going crazy. Can you remember a disagreement where simply reflecting back, yeah, all the time now, literally all the time now, is that just having that conversation where you say, am I understanding you correctly? And putting it back to them, and then giving them the opportunity to let you know if you got anything wrong. Because if you're not talking about the same thing, or you've misunderstood, or
Mhm.
like my trigger of not being understood correctly, then you're having a whole lot of wasted time and energy over
Mhm.
something that isn't even understood. So reflecting back gives the opportunity for the person to say, yeah, you got it right, or you didn't.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a ripple effect to when you master empathetic listening, the effects extend far beyond simple conversations. Your colleagues begin to trust you with sensitive issues. Why? Because they feel like you hear them, you validate what their feelings and their emotions. It doesn't mean that you're agreeing with them, but they feel like they are heard. Your family members feel safer when sharing their own struggles because they know that you really do care about them and what it is that they have to say, what their voice and their internal is thinking. This is a ripple effect. And Eric talked about, your thoughts affect your body and your body affects your thoughts. Well, it's all energetics, and the way you behave affects others, quantum physics. And the way others respond to you can affect you, but you can interrupt and adjust that. And that's what empathy is. Empathy is moving out of your natural, a proposed natural response of whatever it is and choosing, excuse me, to be empathetic. You become known as someone who can handle conflict with grace and wisdom, a person who is sought out when relationships get challenging because people feel like they can trust you in their conversation. So, what have you noticed about you in conflict behaviors? Friends, think about this conversation, think about yourself, think about your own triggers, reflect on your behaviors, how you handle things, and choose differently. Now, if you're already empathetic, kudos to you, and help others to learn. So let's move into building
Hey,
your empathy.
real quick on that one.
Mhm, mhm,
We've talked a lot about interpersonal relationships, wives, children, all that stuff. When you talk about business, even because many people may be watching this or thinking about this in terms of professionalism,
mhm,
when it gets to the top and you're a leader, most of your skills are already there. Most of your tangible skills, the things that you do well, are already there. It's the behaviors that hold you back. And good leaders use empathy. And empathy means that you're not thinking about yourself. Success, you think about yourself. Becoming a great leader, you think about others. So using that empathy to think about others. What do others need? How do I empower others? How do I understand others? How do I empower this team, this person, in order so that they can now do their best? You talked about the self-care. Put that oxygen mask on first. Take the time if you need to, because if you don't, you're not going to show up as good as you could for yourself, for others, for organizations. So just food for thought for people thinking that this is all about just interpersonal relationships. It does extend very much into the professional world as well.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting that. That is so true. And you can improve your empathy muscle by doing it daily, by staying curious. And Eric talked about that. It's he talked about a few things. He talked about one, self-compassion, so taking care of yourself. But he also talked about two, thinking about the other person's lens. What does this person need? Where are they coming from? What are their thoughts, their experiences? And pausing when you're handling different things. What is your favorite strategy and why?
Favorite strategy is just bringing people into the fold and doing it consistently enough that they know I'm approachable, and that the people that I work with are going to be able to be that type of person that can come to a meeting or come into a conflict or come into an argument that allows that conversation to happen, and it gets beyond the positional level. Oftentimes, you talked about the two levels. On the position, one has to win and one has to lose. On the aspirational level, you're both putting towards the same thing. I think so. As we mature on this, and mental fitness, you said building muscles. This is fitness. This is repetitions. This is not something that we're born innately good at, most of us. So it's a matter of doing it consistently to the point to where those people in your life can rely on you to be empathetic and open and move things forward.
And when we think about a work situation, which I really liked because relationships extend outside of our home. And so here are some things that you can work on. This is an empathy toolkit that will help you become more empathetic. You use terms and phrases like help me to understand. What am I hearing? It sounds like you're feeling. That one's really powerful. When you say it sounds like you're feeling angry, it sounds like you're feeling frustrated. The first response generally is someone will correct you if you're wrong. Like, no, I'm
That's
not angry.
exactly. Yeah.
I just
I
feel like you don't
misinterpret it.
hear me. That's a really powerful one. So, tell me more about reflection starters. This is a personal thing. So what you're saying is, you're basically paraphrasing what they're saying, and that's another one. People will correct you, right? And then the validation phrases. Your experience matters. I can see why you'd feel that way. And Eric talked about that when he was talking about his wife, and he said his automatic response was like, "Hello, closed shoes." But then he was like, "Ooh, how are you doing? That must have really hurt." And he corrected and made an adjustment. I don't even know if I want to say corrected, but he made an adjustment. He made an adjustment and he decided to show up more empathetic. Any sharing you'd like to say, Eric?
Modeling it. Yesterday I came home and my son was on his iPad. They don't do a ton of technology, but he was in the middle of something, didn't come up and say hi. And later on, he had just said, "Hey, Dad, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't set it down. I was in the middle of a game. It was kind of intense, and I should have said hi." And I can understand that that may have made you feel bad. I didn't expect that. He just came out with it. 10-year old.
Love it, because he's learning from someone who's teaching him, both you and your wife. So reflecting on the empathy toolkit and effective communication patterns, how can you apply these strategies to a specific conflict or conversation from your own experience to foster deeper understanding and resolution? Anything you want to share on that? Friends, this is for you to think about. It's in your own reflection. You know what keeps you up at night. You know what is stealing your joy, and you know how your peace is getting robbed. So based on the knowledge that you've learned, the strategies and the skill that you're refining, how might you handle things differently, really?
The only thing I would add is you know how things are going to go if you don't. You've been doing that for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years. Give
Yeah,
this a try and then stick with it. See what happens. See what happens in your life.
yeah. So we're at the point, thank you for that, Eric. We're at the point where we're looking at effective communication patterns to de-escalate negative conflicts. We talked about behavior patterns that can create escalated conflict. Now, here's some that can actually de-escalate. So the challenge, they keep interrupting you. How do you handle that? Solution. Gently say, I want to make sure I fully understand before I respond. I get triggered by their words. Solution. Focus on the feeling behind the words, not the words themselves. And another one, I disagree too strongly to listen. Remember, understanding doesn't equal agreement or approval. And we honed in on that because sometimes people think if I'm being empathetic, I'm a doormat. It's not what empathy means. Anything you want to add to this?
I like the feeling behind the words because we tell ourselves a story. And I often use with others in my life when I'm feeling upset, the story that I'm telling myself is that you're doing this for that reason. And that takes that blame and that frustration out of it and allows them to go, no, that story's not right.
Yeah.
And it's
So,
usually not.
yeah, the story that I'm telling myself. It's powerful. Reflecting on the communication challenges and solutions we've explored, recall a recent difficult conversation. How might applying one of these strategies transform its dynamic and outcome in a similar future interaction? And we talked about how we can do that. So, friends, reflect on that. Think about your own experiences and how you might choose differently. So, let's go to our next concept here. And the pink ones are defining that it's a key concept in our objectives. This is the empathy process. And there are 5 steps. You pause, you listen, you gather understanding, you reflect back, You check for alignment and acknowledge experience. You will be receiving this in your free gift. Thank you for attending and investing in yourself. You'll receive an email, and this will be part of your gift. Eric, anything you want to share on this?
No, it looks perfect.
Awesome. Now, when we think about measuring your progress, because as you implement your skills and you become more empathetic, you will see some changes. Here's some changes: less defensiveness, faster resolution, and stronger trust. Those are ways that you can measure, is my empathy actually making a difference? So look for less defensiveness, faster resolution, and stronger trust. We came together for joy, increasing your joy. Joy means journey options you choose. It's about your personal agency, and there is the joy mindset. Our whole goal was to teach you about empathy and how to respond differently. Joy is your free will. It's about starting within. It's your self leadership. And the first person we lead is ourself. So, what can you do next? Your next steps: practice empathetic listening in 3 of your conversations. Next session, we're going to dive even deeper into our next topic. What is the next topic, Eric?
Explore.
Yeah, we're going to be exploring. And,
De-escalating conflict through exploration.
and we had this same challenge last time when I was trying to get here.
Right at about the same time.
At the same time, there's too many slides. So, what's one key takeaway that you integrate into your wellness? For me, I am going to practice empathy. What about you?
We talked about this last time. I always
Mhm.
write stuff on my wrist of things I'm working with, and I don't know if you can read that.
Last. Yep.
Last time.
Last
So
one.
in this, the practice is actually live this day as though it's your last day. I
Uh-huh.
don't like that. I don't like that one so much. But what if I'm doing things right now that I might do for the last time? Washing my hands,
Oh,
eating,
yes.
talking to my child, petting my dog, all the little stuff that we take for granted. So part of that is that exercise of just what am I going to do? The more empathy that I have for myself, situations, and others, the more I'm going to be present and enjoy. And if I act like this is maybe the last time I'm going to go to the grocery store, I'm probably going to enjoy it more. I'm probably going to be more present and notice things I haven't noticed before.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. I remember once having on my wrist faith, and it kept reminding me, have faith, have faith. So we also talked about the joy mindset, what it means, journey options you choose by free will, and how to do healthy living. These were the objectives that we intended to cover. As you can see, we were going to be addressing the effective communication patterns, power of empathy, unproductive conflict behaviors, emotional triggers, the empathy process, and constructive communication techniques, as well as practical communication tools and mindfulness techniques. And we said, just breathe. So we have a free gift for you. Joy Journey Options You Choose is going to be giving you a gift to help you find your joy. Remember, the quality of your mindset is directly impacted by your energy levels, your immune function, your cognitive abilities, and your long-term health outcomes. What is the gift? We're giving you the empathy toolkit. And in the empathy toolkit, you will have empathetic listening, what it means, what it looks for. You'll also have the empathy process, and we're going to be giving you some strategies for navigating conflict. What does it look like? Here's navigating. How do you handle it? And when you're ready, please check out Journey Options You Choose at joyoptions.org. We have an assessment. We have a free download of Awaken Joy for the first chapter. You can reframe your mindset and a bunch of other really cool things. Joy is yours. It's your birthright. Claim it. So thank you for joining us. We appreciate you, and we hope that you have a beautiful day. Anything else you'd like to share, Eric, before we stop?
As you can tell, this was a lot. You cruised through the last portion of it. We had to because of time. There was a video before this. I recommend you guys check that out. That had the stop model. Went over a lot of amazing things. This is one tool. we're going to go over 4 more tools. They are all amazing to have in your tool belt. This is a crash course on it. I stay with my clients for at least 12 weeks because this takes a lot of repetition and a lot of time. So I recommend that if this was a lot, go back, watch it again, revisit the past ones, come to the future ones, get a hold of one of us. And coaches are there for a reason. The best athletes in the world keep coaches. The best executive in the world keep coaches. We're not meant to do this alone. We're here for you.
Excellent. Thank you, Eric. I appreciate you. Thank you for being a guest and join us for the next one.